In this episode, we continue talking about my cinematic heroes from the 1980s, so stick around. Hello, fellow dorks and dorkettes, and welcome to Sentimental, emphasis on the mental part, as I talk about the things that bump around in my head and are totally fueled by my own personal nostalgia. In this episode, we're going to talk about more of my cinematic heroes from the 1980s. These were characters from movies that I emulated, that I dressed up as, I ran around the yard pretending to be, and they are forever ingrained in my head as my heroes. Now, let me point out that things were much different in the 1980s, and yeah, I was exposed to R-rated films very early on, so some of these characters, like from the previous lists, might not be heroic in nature, but they were still characters I thought were pretty kick-ass. With the last two lists, I always started with a biggin, and I don't think many come as big as Indiana Jones. Now, I have to be honest, when I was a kid, Raiders of the Lost Ark was very stuffy and boring at times. I mean, it's an awesome movie, and as an adult, I love it. But as a kid, it was a little slow moving at times. But it wasn't until Temple of Doom that was action-packed from beginning to end, had a kid character for my kid self to latch onto, and had a lot of humor, that it was a movie that, yeah, spoke to me more directly than Raiders of the Lost Ark. I mean, I had Temple of Doom trading cards. Wish I had the toys. This kid in my elementary school's mom worked for Random House Books, which was the huge company, warehouse, printing company in our town where I grew up. You know, he brought in calendars for everybody, and I got a Temple of Doom calendar. So month after month, Indiana Jones in all these cool poses. I mean, my favorite is him, ripped up, bloody, holding that machete on top of the rope bridge. That picture will always be ingrained in my head. But anyway, I spent so many countless hours pretending to be him. And I talked about it in a previous episode where I talk about just adventures in my backyard, but I'll go over them again. In another previous episode in the Heroes thing, I talked about that there was a bush in front of my house that was kind of hollowed out because of how it grew up the side of the house. And inside of that, I would hide out. Like that was just my little personal clubhouse with the sticks and everything in there, and I could hide different things on the branches. And I had this old I think it was my grandfather's from World War II little satchel. So I would have that on my side like Indiana Jones, and I just had an old braided rope that I would pretend was a whip. Pair that with a stick as a machete, and yeah, hours of enjoyment. I would pretend to lash, try to lash branches to try to swing across, which never worked. I would, put different treasures I would find in the satchel and run around. I mean, I never said they deserve to be in a museum or anything like that, but yeah, I had so much fun. And that is a hero that spoke to me directly. I mean, action-packed. And one of the things I have to point out, like, us growing up in the 80s, we grew up in a crossroads of generations. And that's because of our grandparents, the ages they were, and also because of the entertainment that we had. I mean, we were before it was called Nick at Night, Nickelodeon just had old shows and movies running constantly. I remember old adventure movies, comedies being run in syndication on the local stations. I mean, everything from Bowery Boys, Abbott and Costello, Sinbad movies, just old World War II, old cowboy movies. I mean, these were things we grew up with in the 80s that kids nowadays have no idea about. So I think Indiana Jones harken back to those eras that we actually had some loose experience with. I mean, yeah, kids nowadays watching it probably don't get the same effect. I mean, he's a great action hero, bar none, but we actually probably got a little something extra out of it because of, like I said, this crossroads of generations that we were in growing up in the 80s. Anyway, I could talk about Indiana Jones for hours and hours. I mean, just one of the best characters. There was a time where his trilogy, in my mind, was better than the Star Wars trilogy, and nowadays, I mean, they're neck and neck. And yes, I said trilogy. I don't count Crystal Skull. Not that it was a horrible movie, but it just does not fit into that classic trilogy of the originals. Anyway, on to number 2, and that is Buckaroo Bonsai. Now, I have to be honest yet again. This movie confused the heck out of me as a kid. I didn't really know what was going on with the different dimensions and the aliens from the other dimension and the storyline with Ellen Barkin. You know, all that stuff just really confused me as a kid, but the movie itself was just so awesome. It's visually pleasing. It has great action. And Buckaroo Banzai as a hero, I mean, he was a brain surgeon, a rock star, a samurai, a test pilot. I mean, he was everything. I mean, and to a kid, if you didn't know what you wanted to be when you grew up, be him. He did everything. Now, how I pretended to be him is a little bit more embarrassing than any of the other things on this list. And that is the Hong Kong Cavaliers roll call scene, if you will, where they're all do 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 do, and they're walking and they're meeting up as a group. That was actually how I pretended that I was part of the Hong Kong Cavaliers or Buckaroo Banzai himself, and I would pretend to be walking in this roll call type of scenario. While I'm being completely honest, I even remember sitting in the back of my parents' car, and if a cool song came on the radio that sounded like a cool opening to a TV show, I would pretend to be in the credits of a TV show. Like, one minute I'd be, and then, like I was in a TV show. So I think it was almost the same thing where I was pretending to be walking with them and being cool and just being awesome. I mean, that was an awesome group of guys, a great bunch of actors. I mean, still to this day, I want tabby boots just like that one dude had. Other than that, I don't have much to say about Buckaroo Banzai. Great movie, great character, great hero. Number 3 on the list is Cho Osagi, which probably isn't a name that sounds very familiar. He was the main character in Revenge of the Ninja that came out in 1983. Now, this was probably one of my first experiences with ninjas, other than probably some earlier Chuck Norris movies that I just saw a couple minutes of while growing up. So, yeah. Played by Sho Kosugi. I mean, here, just peep this trailer real quick. Now tell me that wouldn't fire you up if you were a kid. I mean, ninjas were just awesome. They still are awesome. I mean, the one thing about this era of wearing masks, it's easy for me to be comfortable because I feel like I'm a ninja. I wear this hat, wear it down like this, got my mask like this, ready to get groceries any way that I need to. So, yeah, ninjas, awesome. That part where he shoots the spikes out of his mouth into that dude's face, I mean, that mesmerized me as a kid. I mean, wow, this dude is a living weapon. I mean, how awesome. And then you have all the ninjas that came afterwards, like Storm Shadow, and then Snake Eyes, and yeah, and just ninjas that popped up throughout pop culture in the 80s. I mean, this is, to me, where it all started. And I wanted to be him so bad. I would run around the yard pretending to be a ninja, rolling around, using my patented stick sword to hit stuff. And then when they finally did produce little plastic swords and shuriken and stuff, yeah, I was in seventh heaven because I finally had one. I stuck it in the back of my t-shirt, tried to pull it out, run around the yard, ended up breaking it and like taking what was left of the blade and shoving it into the handle that, because they're hollow on the inside. So it went from a sword to just like a little tanto knife after that. I mean, yeah, I worshipped the ground of the ninja in the 80s. And I know a lot of us did, but to me, this is where it all started. Number 4 on the list is another name that probably doesn't sound very familiar, and that's Gibson Rickenbacker from the movie Cyborg in 1989. Yes, 1989. I was probably entering high school when I saw Cyborg in the theater, but I was so entranced. Jean-Claude Van Damme at that period could do no wrong. I mean, Bloodsport was a great movie, but it was this one that really, really got me. I mean, he had a sword in it, a machete type of sword, and he had this gun that shot arrows. It was almost like a Gatling gun that launched arrows out of it. I mean, the movie was set in a post-apocalyptic world, and he is trying to save a cyborg girl from the evil bad guys. Apparently, she has the answers to help save the world inside of her, and he's a hero. He's doing his splits, doing his kicks, chopping people with his machete, just being JCVD all over the place. This movie was awesome. And yes, at this time in my life, I was taking Taekwondo, and the instructor had this machine where you would sit in it and crank it to try to make yourself split. I mean, all inspired by Jean-Claude Van Damme. I mean, everybody was talking about this dude. Everybody wanted to emulate him. Everyone wanted to do the splits. But yes, still, at that age in my life of however old I was, 89, 13 or whatever, I was still running around my backyard. I mean, was that just me, or was that just how it was in the 80s, that we were allowed to be children for longer? I don't know. That's an interesting question. Let me know what you guys think. Was I just being crazy at that age, or was it something that we all were just allowed to be kids? Anyway, on to number 5. Number 5 is Dutch from Predator, another Arnold Schwarzenegger movie that, yeah. I saw the trailer for Predator in the theaters. I forget what movie it came before, but it creeped the hell out of me. So much, in fact, that I had to run out and buy the issue of Fangoria that came out that actually showed what the Predator looked like. And that helped calm me. Because in the trailer, you didn't see it. You just saw the heat vision. It attacked people. And it creeped me out. So I remember getting the magazine right before I went on a camping trip. Yeah, in the woods. And I remember looking at that picture and just, it calmed me because of how awesome the Predator looked. Now, that's the Predator, but Dutch, as a character, as a hero, was awesome. Arnold Schwarzenegger, yeah, he could do no wrong in this time period. And Predator is probably one of my favorite movies of all time because of him, the Predator, the story. I mean, I love movies that start out as one thing and then by the end just totally twist and turn into a whole different thing. That movie started off as a war movie and then ended as a sci-fi monster movie. I mean, just fluidly changed right into it. And it was awesome. Now, I don't necessarily remember pretending to be him in any specific way other than running around that swamp area that I told you about in a previous episode where it had ferns and skunkweed and a creek and everything was overgrown, and we would run around with Intertech squirt guns and cap guns and, all those toys that looked like the real deal back then that, would probably get you shot nowadays. But back then, the toys looked like the real deal, and we would just run around for hours and hide in the ferns and come up and pretend we were shooting the Predator, or we were just shooting down bad guys, the guerrilla terrorists and all that stuff. I mean, I know that sounds crazy, but those were some of the best times in my life, just running around carefree like that. Anyway, that was 5 of my cinematic heroes. This was part 3, so honestly, that's 15 cinematic heroes so far, with another batch coming soon. I have 3 on the list so far. I just need to rattle my brain around and get 2 more out of there. Somehow. Not yet. But it will be coming soon. And I hope you've enjoyed these episodes. I know some of the choices are a little weird, but I was a weird kid. Heck, I'm a weird adult, so things don't really change. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please give me a thumbs up. If you got something to say, please leave a comment. I love reading them, and I love getting back to everybody. And if you're new around here and you enjoyed this or any of the other episodes that YouTube is recommending down below, please hit subscribe. And if you hit that little bell icon, you'll be notified whenever there's a new episode. So, until next time, thanks for watching. Keep being rad and stay dorky.